Hey there, hope you're doing really good on this Thursday evening where I'm at, probably night in most of the world. Yeah, really excited to have you back here. Have, I think, one message from Tracy, 3 comments, and 2 emails we're going to talk about today. Hopefully, you'll find something that's really helpful to you. Before we start, as always, no medical advice, just me sharing general thoughts and comments here. That said, if you watch the last episode, the ones I call episode pod, where I answer questions from Monday, you may have seen or you may remember that there was this particular message I want to go over that I just couldn't find, and I was looking for it for a couple of minutes, and I don't know what happened to it, but I have it here. So Tracy, sorry about that. And now let's go over it. So this came in actually Monday. I'm gonna get my glasses here. So Tracy wrote the following: Hi, I have reached out to Martin Reed and he's replied a lot to me. My docs have all given up on me. I basically don't fall asleep for days at a time, and if I do sleep, it's only 1 to 2 hours. I've done all the right things as far as sleep hygiene. I have been on every sleep and psych med and cocktails of them. The one combo that did help me, Seroquel and Klonopin. Took it for 13 years and never had insomnia on that, but I had to come off Seroquel in June. I tried other things between then and now with no hope. My doc has no more meds for me to try, and I don't get sleepy. So that is my main issue. I used to sleep okay for 27 years, and I don't know what or if there was a trigger, but suddenly I wasn't getting sleepy. So recently I was on day 6 of no sleep, and it's not paradoxical, it's literally no sleep. I went to the psych ward as I couldn't function, and they just threw a cocktail of meds at me and sent me home. They said meds are one thing, but figuring this all out is something I have to do. I've seen a therapist for 13 years. I'm very healthy. I'm 42 with 2 teenagers. I don't drink or smoke. I had a great life until this all happened. Hyperarousal question mark? Maybe. But how do I stop it? I've tried so many natural things. Anyway, if you can be of help to me, please let me know. It seems no one around me can help me, and I'm at a loss. I can stay up, it seems, forever without feeling sleepy, but then I get miserable and I can't see, get dizzy, can't drive, etc. And by the way, I have never been a long sleeper. I only need 5 hours or so, and I am good, but I can't even get any. Thanks. And then I said, thank you for reaching out. I think there was a little bit, another comment here from Tracy. She also said, thanks. Also, I exercise in the morning and get sunlight. I'm healthy weight, had a sleep study. All things seem fine, but I don't get it. I'm up for many days at a time as a normal sleep schedule, and then I don't even crash. I just eventually sleep 2 hours on occasions. And then finally, Tracy said, my friend sent me this link, which was published today, and of course this creates anxiety. And it's a link about insomnia in adults linked to heart attack and stroke, and we'll talk about that in a second. It's so sad when people publish stuff like that. There's no reason to do that. There's no causality at all. And so then I said, you could read my book on this topic, Why We Don't Sleep. And actually, Tracy had that book and thought it was good. So thanks so much for the support. Now, here we go. So let's go back to the beginning. And actually, before I start going over some points, some specific sections here, the first thing that comes to my mind in reading this is the following. What's described here is not uncommon. I think every 1 to 2 weeks at least, somebody either sends me an email or leaves a comment describing this, having no sleep or virtually no sleep for several days and not feeling sleepy. This bizarre sensation of how is this possible? I'm not sleeping. I don't feel sleepy. I don't crash. I don't get to that point when I sleep 7 or 8 hours. This is so bizarre and strange. And I think it's really important to know that this is not uncommon. It's not uncommon. Many people describe exactly this. And I'm not saying this to, belittle, what you're describing. Not at all. I'm saying this because it is so important to think of your insomnia as typical, ordinary, nothing special. When you start thinking of it that way, that's the first step towards actually decreasing hyperarousal. When you think like, okay, there are many people that had this, and they got better, so why shouldn't I? This is nothing strange or unusual. It happens to many people. That's very, very important. It's a very good belief to have. The opposite of that, the belief that one has a very strange, unusual affliction, is not a good belief. That belief takes you towards more hyperarousal, more pondering, more thinking, more obsessing, more, looking, and whereas the belief that, okay, this is ordinary, many people have had that, this is nothing strange, takes you towards, okay, what works for others will work for me too. And you read my book, so you may be very familiar with my channel, but otherwise, I often refer to Ellen, and I think it's so you should definitely listen to all the episodes on Ellen that you can find, and you'll see that her story very similar to yours. Actually, there's some differences. I think for her, she had insomnia for about a year when she connected with me, but also like not sleepy, going days with zero sleep, not feeling sleep during the day, very healthy, good and active lifestyle and all that. And she realized as she started using, the classical CBTI techniques, that she had much more hyperarousal than she realized in the beginning. Hyperarousal was what was driving her insomnia. Now, if you do this, and if you explore all the episodes where Ellen is featured, then look for similarities. Don't try to find things that are different, because then you're again on that path towards like thinking that your situation is very different and unusual, which doesn't lead to a good place. But look for things that are similar and say like, okay, that's similar, that's all similar, that fits. The more you can feel like, okay, what's happening to me is similar to what's happening to her. She got better, I can also get better. That's you should always look for similarity. You should always try to think of your insomnia as not unusual and special. So having made that kind of like that was the kind of first big point I thought we could make here. Let's go over a couple of things. Sorry about this. First thing I thought about here was like, I have done all the right things as far as sleep hygiene. And here, I can't express how frustrating and what's the word I'm looking for? For me, it's frustrating, but also like I have so much empathy with people with insomnia, because sleep hygiene is terrible. It's terrible, I think. I used to believe that it was, pardon me, I used to believe it was kind of neutral, but now I strongly believe that sleep hygiene is a big problem. Yesterday, I was writing a little article, and I was writing about sleep hygiene. I was like, let me check it. So I went to this National Sleep Foundation, their homepage, and read about sleep hygiene, and I was so upset, because it says that you should have your temperature 67 to 68 degrees. You should avoid spicy food. You should avoid fatty food before you go to bed. You shouldn't exercise too much. You should exercise. And what that does when you're trying to do all these if you feel like sleep is complex, there are many things that can make you sleep better or worse, more or less, and you feel like you have to get all these little things right, guess what? That's going to produce so much sleep anxiety, because you feel like, I didn't sleep, I must have done this thing wrong. What did I do wrong? Temperature was 69. Oh no, I ate a burrito. Oh no. Sleep is simple. It is very simple, and it's also, again, so important to think of sleep as something very simple. There's only two things that determine how we sleep. It is our sleep drive, which is our body's need for sleep, our hunger for sleep. And so the more we stay awake, the stronger that sleep drive becomes. That's kind of the gas that makes us sleep. And then we have the break, which is hyperarousal, which is any kind of like excitement, worry, stress, or again, it can be like very subtle. You don't even notice it, but it's there. Like that's the break. And somebody like yourself, Tracy, may say like, well, I am up for several days. I have no sleep drive. It can be that this hyperarousal level you don't feel is so strong that it's stronger than your sleep drive. You don't feel your sleep drive. Or sometimes they can be conflicting. Like you can have both. You're really, really sleepy and you're hyperaroused, and that's when you can get this, like, you can feel dizzy, weird, like strange, like, because your body's kind of fighting itself. It wants to sleep, but it wants to keep you awake. Your sleep drive wants to make you sleep, but you're kind of the part of your brain that is so preoccupied with sleep wants to keep you awake, and that you can feel like really bizarre out of body sensations, and you can have twitches and jerks and things like that as well. Now, so going back to that, yeah, so sleep hygiene, I think, to be honest with everyone out there, I think the best thing to do is forget about it. Forget about all these rules and regulations. If you, as a person, like to keep your bedroom decluttered and cool just because that's the way you like it, perfect. But if you're trying to keep the bedroom a certain temperature, a certain light, certain, for the purpose of producing sleep, you should not do that. That is just going to create more confusion, anxiety, hyperarousal, and more insomnia. So sleep hygiene, forget about it. And what should you do before you go to bed? I say something you enjoy, like watch a Netflix show, or call a friend, or watch TV, or read a book, or like do anything just for the purpose of enjoying that. Do not do anything for the purpose of producing sleep. I think that's super important. Now, on the medication front here, I think many of you have heard me say this many times, but medications cannot produce sleep. It's just impossible. Like the only thing that can make you sleep is your own body. And propofol and anesthetics, they don't make you sleep. They put you in a state of unconsciousness, which is not at all like sleep. And Seroquel or Lunesta or Ambien or clonidine or whatever it is, they are sedating. They can make you feel like they can kind of like put a damper on your nervous system, so you feel kind of groggy or sedated. And that can like reduce like hyperarousal, the break, if you will. So it kind of allows your own body to sleep, but they cannot produce sleep. The belief that medications can produce sleep is another very harmful belief to your sleep, because what happens is, if you're taking something, so any external thing, and you're sleeping, and you've made this connection, and you believe that this thing is making me sleep, is producing sleep, then when you're not taking it anymore, then you know what? You're gonna believe that you can't sleep. You're gonna be like, I'm not taking this, and I'm not gonna sleep, and this is gonna happen, and then it becomes self-fulfilling. So the belief that something external can produce sleep is a belief that one should let go, definitely. So that was that. A little bit on medications. You say hyperarousal question mark. Yeah, I definitely think when I read something like this, I see hyperarousal is at work here. And another thing, you mentioned, Tracy, you've never been a long sleeper. Very common. People with insomnia almost always are short sleepers at baseline. And now, if you listen to in many of my episodes here, I talk about this thing called the 3P model, which we're not going to go over here. But I just want to point one thing out, which is people that are predisposed towards insomnia are people that have a tendency to worry, are like kind of type A personality, like high achievers, intelligent, and health conscious. Almost, not everyone, but I would say the majority of the patients I see that have insomnia are lean, fit. They eat right. They exercise. They're conscious. They take their health seriously, which is great in almost every aspect of our lives, except when it comes to sleep. When we, giving sleep attention, thinking of sleep as important, thinking of sleep as something you need to have for good health, etc., definitely predisposed to insomnia and produces a lot of insomnia. And speaking of that, your friend sent you this article, and I was thinking, like, why does your friend do that? Like, your friend knows that you have trouble sleeping, maybe or maybe not. Why does she send you a link about this study that says that insomnia is linked to heart attack and stroke? And why do you read it? Like, it always, it's natural. I know it's natural, but I do see so many patients that that read a lot about insomnia. They have insomnia, and then they read about how it can cause this, how it can that, and I'm thinking, how is this helpful to you? It's don't read these things. Like, it's not, one reason not to read these things are that it's not going to help you. It's just going to cause more anxiety and more insomnia, right? But more importantly here, there is no evidence at all. There's not a single shred of evidence that short sleep or insomnia causes heart attacks or strokes or anything like that. Ashtrays are linked to COPD. Definitely. There's no question about that. But ashtrays do not cause COPD, right? And that's never been shown. And similar, it's never been shown that short sleep or insomnia causes any health issues. In fact, there was this study from earlier this year, I think it was published in February by, is it Leonard or Leonard? Lask and Lovato are the names of the authors. They looked at 26 million people, and there was no difference in longevity or health outcomes for people that had insomnia or no insomnia. So nothing to worry about there. And I felt there was one more thing I wanted to point out. So, like, I guess the question here becomes like, okay, so for somebody like yourself, Tracy, what should one do? I think you said, you mentioned you need 5 hours of sleep and you'd be good. Well, I think number one, classic, is like, don't spend more than that in bed, maybe 5 hours, 5.5, something like that for now. And then when you're sleeping better, you can relax that, but it's always good to spend a little time in bed. But more important than that, much more important than that, is the following. What really drives insomnia is attention and preoccupation. Thinking about like, oh, should I adjust this medication? Should I start this supplement? Why can't I sleep? Is it because I hit my head? Is it because of that? Is it because of this? What should I do next? All that is what feeds insomnia, feeds the hyperarousal. So I think the best thing to do is to set it and forget it. Say like, okay, I'm going to get up at, 5 a.m. every morning. I'm not going to go to bed before, 11. And other than that, I'm just going to enjoy life. I'm going to take up baking, or I'm going to start learning about archery, or I'm going to, whatever it is, like, do stuff that you enjoy that completely gets your mind off of sleep, take a sleep detox too. Like, don't read about sleep, don't Google it, don't talk about it. Like, just, shift attention completely. I think that's the key. That is the key. So Tracy, I want to thank you so much for sending me these messages, and I hope this was helpful. And follow-up questions, please send them to me. Please do. All right, cool. Now that said, let's jump to this email from Vincent from the Philippines, who has, I want to thank you too, Vincent, for the many great questions you've sent me. And so 3 days ago, Vincent wrote me the following. Daniel, good day. Thank you for great advice. It really helps me a lot. Recently, I'm having a problem. Before my bedtime, I take Seroquel. Then after 30 minutes of no sleep, I take Ambien. Then after 30 minutes with still no sleep, I take Valium. This has been my habit at least for 3 days. Has been my habit. And the last 3 days was awesome. I was able to sleep for 3 days straight with 3 to 4 hours. But right now, I haven't been sleeping for 3 days. I don't know if the reason is research for more information about the CBTI, or I'm on sleep arousal because I'm trying to accept my thought, then challenge my thought, or just watch TV, but still I can't fall asleep. Please, can you tell me what's happening to me? Well, firstly, I don't know how long you've been taking these medications, but it sounds to me as if you are taking Seroquel, and then kind of like, if you don't sleep, you take Ambien, and then if you don't sleep, you take Valium, which leads me to this. I think medications cannot produce sleep. I think if somebody's taking medication and they're sleeping great, then there's no problem with that, except if that person believes that the medication is making them sleep. Because if that person believes that, they are vulnerable. Because when something happens, something throws things off and they're not sleeping anymore, then they may believe that the medication has stopped working. And they then look for an external thing. They look to increase the medication or try another medication, and that can then create more unhealthy beliefs, such as like, I now need this medication plus this medication to sleep, and my insomnia is actually worse. And then and then it happens, you get thrown off again, and then you look for another thing, and suddenly you're taking like many medications, and you believe that you need all this to sleep. Like your sleep confidence gets kind of like lower and lower and lower as you do more things. Now, getting more practical here, I think if somebody takes the same, like a good place to start, let's say that if you're looking to like, want to sleep better, is to not use medications conditionally, meaning if somebody goes to bed and takes a medication, let's say, and then says, okay, I think this will help me sleep, let's see. If not, I might take this other thing. Then that by default will lead to self-monitoring. It will lead to like, you go to bed and you're thinking like, okay, let's see, am I sleepy? Am I gonna fall asleep? Maybe not. Maybe I should take half of the medication, or maybe all, or maybe I should try to wait a little longer. What is now 45 minutes? That thought process, that kind of like self-monitoring and thinking about what should I do, etc., that produces a lot of insomnia. So it's much better to take medications like the same dose, the same time every day without questioning it, because then it's like there's no question, no what if, no think about what should I do. I'm just going to do that. So I think using medications conditionally like that does produce a lot of insomnia. Now, you also say, I don't know if the reason is I'm still searching for more information about CBT. It's true that looking for kind of like researching sleep and looking for the reason, etc., can produce insomnia. That is very true. So I guess the conclusion here, like, we don't know why it is that you slept well for 3 days and then you didn't sleep at all or slept very little for 3 days. But the point here, the bigger point, is that trying to figure out what happens is a big driver of insomnia, So the best thing to do is not to try to figure out why you're not sleeping better, but just continue the path. And what do I mean by that, continue the path? I mean, when you're trying to get past your insomnia, I think a very good place to start is to have get up at the same time every morning and not go to bed, let's say, go to bed like not more than 6 hours before that, or 6.5 hours before that. That is kind of like a big part of the path. Another part of the path is not researching, not wondering, not trying to produce sleep, but just like set it and forget it again. Just do things that you enjoy, And then when you get into one of these places where you're like, okay, now I'm sleeping less, then you just continue the path. You don't change anything. You don't react to it. You don't make any modifications. And then when sleep kind of comes back again, then guess what? You're in a stronger position now because you didn't react. You didn't do anything. You just continued the path, and you saw that you could sleep better by just walking this path. And the more times you sleep you sleep less again, and then you go back to sleeping better, the stronger your sleep confidence becomes. So I think that is super important. So I hope this was helpful, Vincent, and please email me again if you have follow-up questions. And anyone out there, I'm super grateful for comments, questions. That is the lifeblood of this channel, Really, really appreciate it. Cool. So that was Vincent's question, and then there was a short one here from, I'm not sure actually. Here it is. I have chronic insomnia for 15 years. I did CBD, therapy, trauma counseling, EMDR. My insomnia is so bad that I'm unable to function. I'm awake every other night, the entire night, unable to fall asleep. Insomnia is getting worse. Trazodone, Sublinox is not working. I use sleep hygiene, etc. So I'm anxious after being in bed for 30 minutes, and I get up and read Then by 3 a.m. I cry, losing control of my life. I'm worried. I was very sorry to hear this. And, you know, it's very clear that insomnia has a big impact here on your life. Now, I want to say that, first of all, I'm happy you connected with me. I think what I talk about here is at least, you know, like evidence-based, and I think a lot of problem with insomnia is all the kind of misguiding pieces of advice you get out there. So a few things, like one, I'm working with sleep hygiene, as I talked about it before, trying to get everything right and like set things up for sleep, and like, you know, all that preoccupation often makes things worse. So I think I really think that it's important to look forward to bedtime. You know, do something before you go to bed that you enjoy. You know, I always talk about Netflix. I don't know why, but that's, I guess, because that's why I usually do. Watch a Netflix show, or do something that's fun, so you look forward to bedtime. That's important. Again, getting up at the same time every morning is good. Other than that, like, try not to, I feel like I'm repeating myself, but you know, try not to research and try to just tweak it are the best things, I think. So, and by the way, if you're new to this channel, then you know, there's a lot to learn here. Like, go back to the early episodes and get the basics, and then just peruse it. And I hope you'll find something that's really helpful to hear. And feel free to send any follow-up question, of course. And now let us move on to three comments. And the first one here is from Tammy. And this came in 12 hours ago. And it's a comment on Insomnia Insight number 52 about jerky body movements when you're going to bed. And Tammy said, I'm really upset about this awakening me too early, causing me daytime exhaustion when I need strength to get through this life. We can read from this comment that obviously these jerky movements have had a big impact. We don't know if it's an ongoing thing or it just happened one time, but I'm guessing it's an ongoing thing. And I just want to say that, yes, of course, this is annoying and frustrating. I think though that, like, the key, in my opinion, is when it comes to these jerky body movements, twitches as well, and like surges of energy and all those things that are related to hyperarousal, they kind of like a micro version of insomnia, meaning like the more attention we give them, the stronger they become. You know, the more tense we are, and like, I don't want to have that jerk. I really don't want it. The more we tense up, the more it happens. And it's kind of like, I've started using this analogy a lot. Like those, like the 100-meter dash, you know, the Olympics or World Championships or whatever, and all these people are lined up and they're just waiting for that shot, and then they're going to run. That hyperarousal causes them to sometimes just, without nothing, they just run. You know, they're so hyperaroused. Same thing with these body jerks. Like, the more hyperaroused, the more kind of like hyper alert our nervous system, and the more likely we are to have these jerks. And now the thing there is that you can't do anything directly aimed at reducing hyperarousal. You can't be like, okay, I'm going to do yoga so I'm less hyperaroused. That doesn't work, because then you are thinking about the hyperarousal. So you have to, again, try to distract yourself, do things that are enjoyable before you go to bed, and try not to, like, as much as possible, try not to research these things or give them attention. That's important. And also, like, if you had a night like that, you woke up too early, you're exhausted, and you need the strength now to get through your life, try to find that strength somewhere inside, like the reserves, you know? Try to find those reserves so you can kind of get through your day without those jerks affecting you too much. And if you can do that, then you're on the path to, like, really getting past them. Because if you can get to a point where you're like, I had those jerks, they woke me up really early, but I had a pretty good day, then you're less fearful of them. Then you're less worried that they will happen again. And when that happens, when you are not as afraid of them happening again, well, guess what? They happen less often. So finding those reserves are good, and also finding like No, actually, that did not really apply. Sorry, my mind went in the wrong direction there. Tammy, hope this helps, and hope you get less of these jerks. Now, Misha Ali, 7 hours ago, commented on Insomnia number 268 and said, Daniel, is it possible to lose our ability to sleep if you hit your head or got hit in the head? And the short answer, which I said in my reply there, is no. You cannot, that cannot happen. It's never been described, and it's not possible. It's just like you can't lose the ability to breathe, that it always resumes. It's always preserved. And I felt like, here's why I wanted to expand on this was, this said, the belief that one has lost the ability to sleep is a very common one. It's a very common one, and for different reasons. Some people think that the insomnia itself has kind of ruined a sleep switch in the brain or caused some kind of imbalance that is permanent, and now they're never going to fall asleep again. That cannot happen. Or people, things like, oh, who was that? Somebody that recently sent a couple of questions. Amber thought that she had used drugs earlier in her life that now had caused her brain to be damaged, so she couldn't sleep. Or people think that medications, like I've taken medications for long. No, that sleep system is complex and very the opposite of fragile. It's very robust, if you will. You cannot lose the ability to sleep. Hope this helps, Misha, and hope you sleep better. And then finally, this is a comment from AProperLady on Insomnia Insight number 242. And it reads as follows. I think this explains what I deal with on a regular basis. And let me just see if I can remember. The title of this episode was When Our Daily Function Depends on How We Sleep, or maybe not completely. I think I was talking about how if we find evidence that we do pretty well, even after not sleeping much. So if you saw my reaction there, I just remember that I have to post this video actually today on something that I talked about last Friday. Anyway, so I'm not sure exactly what the episode was about, but let's just continue reading here. I do get anticipatory anxiety, so it only makes sense that I would have it at night as well. My daughter wakes up many times every night, so I always know that she will wake me up every 2, sometimes fewer hours. That is compounded with the concern over not being able to care for my children adequately during the day because I'm so tired. I have many sleepless nights because I expect to not be able to sleep, and I completely panic. It's horrible. Totally see how that would happen. Now, I want to say this. I've lately, I think maybe it's just a cluster coincidence. I'm sure it's always been like that, but I've noticed it more recently that having young children, having infants, is a real trigger for insomnia that can go on even as the kids are sleeping better. And which is kind of a change in thinking for me. I always thought of having infants would actually kind of cure, for many people, it does cure insomnia because you're so, your sleep is so fragmented overnight and you're busy during the day that you're so exhausted that you have no trouble sleeping. That can happen, but the other can happen too. You can start losing control of your sleep and in a different way than, with insomnia, you often feel like you have no control of your sleep, but there's actually no external factor that is producing insomnia, but when you have an infant, it is true. You don't have, you literally have no control of sleep because that little infant needs you maybe every 1 hour, every 2 hours, 3 hours, and it depends from night to night. Now, and that can that can continue, of course. You can continue even when the kid feels sleeps more, then you can have this lingering fear of losing sleep that then ultimately even though the baby isn't waking up, you now have insomnia. because you have experienced this sleep loss, and now it's almost like PTSD, right? Now, but on a positive side note, I have had one recent client, actually two recent clients on the app on bedtime that have done really well. One did fantastic. I think her kids were a little older, and another one is doing really well actually too, and she has a pretty young one. So I want to say that even though you have a young child, that doesn't mean that the techniques I talk about here aren't going to work. In fact, I've seen them work really, really well, even for someone that has an infant. So, so although again, yes, when you have an infant that's waking up, that is a circumstance that is, different from other people with insomnia. But the core kind of like mechanism that keeps insomnia going is still not different. It is still the fear of losing sleep, attempts at protecting sleep, and like your brain having identified loss of sleep as a threat. That is still the same. It's still the same thing. All insomnia is always the same. Yes, there are different circumstances, but the basis of it is still the same, and that's important to know. Again, because you don't want to think of your insomnia as different from others. You want to think of it as typical and ordinary. That is really helpful. So I think as much as possible, the same principles applies to somebody that has a small child. Like, still try to get up at the same time every morning. Try not to sleep during the day, and maybe one shouldn't have like a really tight sleep window. Maybe one should allow oneself like maybe 7.5 hours in bed or something like that. But I think you should, the same principles still apply, and you're still going to wake up to hear your baby, but then you might, if you do this sleep window technique here, you'll fall back to sleep easier. That was one thing. And also this one, I'm worried about like taking care of my children because I'm so tired. Well, here is what I was thinking about previously, and it didn't apply to the previous comment, because this is where I thought that could be helpful. Evidence. Are there times? I mean, sure, there have been many times where you have slept poorly, but you've done a great job taking care of your kids, right? And that's evidence that sleeping little doesn't mean that you're gonna not take care of children well. And then when you see that evidence, like, okay, even if I slept very little that time, I did a great job taking care of my kids, then again, the fear of losing sleep, the fear of sleeping little goes down, and that can really, really help, because it's all about like when we don't fear losing sleep, we can sleep. So I hope that helped, and as I've said many times here, any follow-up questions, please leave another comment, and I will be more than happy to reply, of course. All right, so I think that was it for today. Hope this has been valuable to anyone that tuned in here, and I shall I'm going to post a quick episode right now with the answer to, so last Friday I asked people to kind of do a challenge, or like what did they call it, a challenge or a technique or something like that, where I asked people to keep a diary for a few days, and at the end of the day say like, how did I feel today and why? And I'm going to reveal tonight why I think that's important. But yeah, thanks so much for all the comments and questions. I'm super grateful, and hope to have you back here real soon. Until then, take it easy.